And we should all be unmuted. Hello, everybody. I finally figured out how to do at least a countdown. Let's start with some housekeeping and apologies. We are about half an hour ahead or before time because I didn't really figured out that the US had a daylight saving thing, and there was much confusion about when to begin. The title of this week's second Blowback Roundtable is A Fragile World Order, which comes from the annually released US Intel report. And it also features Regis Tremblay, our regular guest from Crimea, but we're not certain that he can pop by. He's out of town and he might be popping by via phone, but you have me and Carlo Parcelli from the Belly of the Beast, Washington, D.C., and our almost regular guest or panelist, Ian Kummer, near Moscow in the suburbs. How's everybody?
Doing well. I want to say it's really, I should take the blame because I'm here in the U.S. I'm right here in the, as you say, the belly of the beast, or as I call it, Satan's anus. And I should have notified all of you, you guys out of the country, that there's a time change. But as to paraphrase Pepe Escobar, the United States does not matter anymore. So let's not fret too much about it.
Top comment. Okay, well, yeah, as I said, this line comes from the annual release. It was basically, there was a big presser thing with Avril Haines, the director of U.S. National Intelligence, also William Burns, the CIA guy who released this document, which is readable online yesterday, 40, 50 pages, something like that. Obviously, I got to know about this today and I didn't read it, but different countries have made very different headlines over this, and it seems central that the US is in this fragile world order, which, you know, it seemed very robust 2 or 3 years ago, but apparently like a lengthy what do you call it, conflict in the Middle East, West Asia could call into question the leadership of the US. Also, Israel had some headlines in the Times of Israel that the leadership of Mr. Netanyahu was in peril. But what the Russian media, TASS, RT, Izvestia, got out of it was basically the first 3 chapters are Russia, China, Iran. Those are the first 3 chapters of the table of contents. Is that they don't see it in the planning or in the interests of Russia to have an all-out conflict with NATO or the US, and they consider it, I'm looking for the word, not an enemy, but it's a stable and capable adversary. So that also goes in the face of all the threats we've heard from Kuleba and other people of the Baltic states are going to burn if Russia wins in Ukraine, then NATO is up for grabs. And basically, yeah, that's where the title comes from. We'll have to still read up on most of it, but I guess that's sort of the opening thought-provoking part that we got this morning. But there's plenty of other groups of news clusters that have been found ever since. But I was wondering, the view from Moscow, perhaps?
Well, so I think how you just described it is pretty accurate that was kind of the official Russian statement. And I think that's how, just at the grassroots level, how Russians feel about it too. I mean, it's not really even, the USA is not some existential enemy of Russia. It's an adversary now, but, you know, a stable, reliable adversary now can be a partner tomorrow. I think that's the attitude. What I find most, because I did skim the report before we started, you know, my first impression of it is it's a world order running out of time. So I think and I actually wrote about this on Quora this morning, is that if Russia gets through the next 20 years without an all-out war with NATO, they've basically won by default, because in the long game, you know, they grow, they get stronger, they get militarily more capable. Their economy becomes more self-reliant and not dependent on Western investment. So if they can get through the next 10, 20 years, they're good. But, you know, it's not looking so good for NATO and the international order, or the world order, as Liz Truss famously described it. It has to be a global force for good. You know, it's not looking good. And I say the main reason why is because if you look at the demographics of every country bordering Russia that could potentially be leverage against Russia, are all in the advanced stages of population decline. And, people howl loud us about birth rates, but it's less to do with birth rates because, most or all developed countries have low birth rates, below that 2.0 average you're supposed to have. The problem is outward migration. The Baltic tigers and Poland, to a lesser extent, have a lot of outward migration. They just go west to find work. So if you want to leverage them against Russia like they did with Ukraine, they caught Ukraine in that window before it completely collapsed. But if you go another 5-10 years, who is going to be left to be cannon fodder in the Baltic states?
True.
Even less military age men descend. And that's so if they want to suck Russia, if they want to extend Russia, as the Rand Corporation put it.
2019, right?
Right.
That's the paper.
That worked in Ukraine to an extent. But if they want to repeat it and they want to provoke Russia into some sort of conflict, the details of which we could only speculate about, they'd have to do it soon if they wanted to repeat it somewhere else. And if they miss that window, if Russia doesn't take the bait or just is not provoked enough or isn't threatened enough, the window will close. There'll be no neighboring country. I mean, even Japan, which they're trying to militarize more, get Japanese militarized again. Well, I mean, they're aging and also have the same problem. Who in Japan are they going to be able to send? I mean, so it's just every country that they could even conceivably use, like they used with Ukraine, just won't demographically be capable of a major war, and that's just the end.
And who's willing for the final chapter of this? Well, Oscar winning, I won't say, but Oscar buying actor in Kiev, the Green Goblin, who got his from Sean Penn, right? Who's willing to die for this? I mean, even in France, Macron is the most gung-ho. There's Florian Philippot's Patriot Party. There's these posters that we're not going to die for Ukraine. Even the Poles, the Polish Ukrainian Commonwealth we were treated to in 2022. That's completely over. It looks like the sentiments have turned 180 degrees. Ms. Baerbock, that is the way to signal opposite. Not 360, and yet still they're playing these games, and I don't know with what people, and I don't know with what guns they think they're gonna achieve the significant strategic victory over Russia. I mean, if you listen to the copium coming out of Kiev, then I always get mixed up. Budanov or Danilov. Budanov is the military intelligence guy.
He's the military SBU guy, yes.
He's planning very serious operations into Crimea. So if Regis Tremblay is with us later, he can tell us how afraid he is about that. And they're doing the usual stuff. I mean, what we have today, again on Twitter, it looks annual as well, is the People's Republic of Belgorod. The Belgorod incursions by mostly Ukrainians, but the Western headlines call them Russian patriots going to liberate Russia. So some of those neo-Nazi battalions who serve Ukraine wanted to enter. And I scrambled a bunch of Russian and Ukrainian news about it. You might know better. I know that the two regions they tried to enter is Kursk and Belgorod again, apparently with quite a lot of armor, 6 or 7 tanks, according to the FSB, 1 Caesar howitzer, about 20 armored personal carriers, and pretty much all wiped out at gathering grounds and at the border. But that's not the Ukrainian copium. We're coming to liberate all of Russia again, to signal to the West we can still do something. Not sure what the thinking is, but here we are again.
There's quite a bit of speculation about that, especially because right before that extended holiday period with International Women's Day, there was that press release from the U.S. diplomatic service, the embassy, for all American citizens to leave Russia.
And terrorist attacks.
Yes. So there's a lot of speculation if the two were related. So, and the timing is very interesting. That's the U.S. embassy put out that, especially since they said not Ukrainians but extremists. So if they're trying to market these guys as Russian freedom fighters, the two, that would make sense. It might also be coincidence.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I don't have this perfectly in my head, but I think those warnings were issued for Moscow region, right? Not in the entirety of Russia.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. But it could be implied as it could have. I mean, Moscow was the site specifically mentioned, but they wanted Americans to leave all of Russia. And so my first thought is that the two are unrelated. And when the embassy puts out those warnings and they get plastered all over the media, that's aimed at an internal audience. Like I was just talking to my mom today, and she mentioned, there's that scary warning put out. So I think it's just, Americans back home looked at it and it's like, oh, Russia's very scary right now. So I think it's kind of, it's preaching to the choir. It's for an internal audience that Russia's scary. And it was a holiday period. So it's a coincidence because the Ukrainians saw a very big Russian holiday period. So it was a good time to try something. And the U.S. diplomatic service thought the same thing independently of the Ukrainians. So it was a good time to put out some sort of scary warning.
And quite close. I'm not sure. When exactly does the election begin in Russia? I think we're close. I know it's this month.
It's this week, I think. I honestly don't remember the exact date.
Anyway, let's say
it's close.
Less than a week away. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
That would be a good way in the Ukrainian mind to embarrass Putin and make him look bad by staging a large scale incursion. I do find interesting about from the Russian sources, the composition of this force that they allegedly hit was that there were no American. I didn't see any explicitly American equipment cited in it, which I think is an interesting development. Because if you remember the first big Russian freedom fighter incursion into Belgorod,
Bradley's, I remember that.
Because of it wasn't Bradley's. I don't think it was the Humvee specifically. There was American small arms and American Humvees, and there's those pictures the FSB put out of the American vehicles, and there was a big stink about that. I think there was an effect. I think the Ukrainians planned this and were essentially forbidden from using American equipment into an attempted incursion on Russia proper, outside of the disputed region. So
well, I know the Caesar, that's French, right? I
want to say that's French. I'm 90% sure that's French, yes.
Yeah. I didn't see yet any data on which tanks or which armored personnel carriers were used, but it would be interesting to have a full Francois incursion, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Especially with the headlines going around.
If we saw Bradley's or Abrams, I'm sure they would have mentioned them specifically. So we could be mistaken because they just said tanks, and they didn't specify that level of detail. But I'm suspecting there were not any American origin vehicles in this one. Just because they don't want to further, because I think that's logical too. Because since American aid is already kind of on the wire, they're scared of losing further American aid and having that kind of scandal of American equipment was caught in Russia again. That could really tip it in the Republicans' favor to just stop.
Plus, the recent tank duel, I think, made public by the Russian Foreign Ministry, which is rare. Between not even the latest Russian tank T-72, maybe?
It was a T-72B something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. First shot taken out in Abrams. That's a very bad optical thing. And apparently the same is happening to the famous challengers from Great Britain. And it was funny to see there was this Sun, for the Sun, which is a UK tabloid. There was this group of people going over there to show, look, the famous British sniping tank that takes out stuff from 4.5 kilometers away, gets stuck in the mud like in the first 10 minutes, and they had to put out that video. It's available. Not looking so good. I've seen reports. This is Telegram. Not sure if it's real that they actually want those brought back from the front line. So I don't know. Everything is going to be brought back from the front lines because, from what I can see by the published footage, the Patriots are being hunted in the front line. So are all the mobile howitzers, the SAMP-T, hell of a way to say it, which is the French one, the Iris-T air defense. I mean, even forcing them to be deployed that far out, not around Kiev as intended by the West, is very interesting. Apparently huge losses. Now, in this news, there was very interesting stuff about arms and ammunition. It seems like they're coping to the fact that Russia can outproduce NATO and the US by 3-1. Yeah, I think last year it was 6 or 7 to 1, but basically now that was a CNN exclusive, and it's only to do with shells. Also, like a 1 to 6 price advantage on the Russian side. So I think it's very interesting to see at least some admission that a protracted war of attrition, which this is basically unwinnable. And there's a lot of these despairing pieces written by especially the British, some German and American press, that things aren't looking good for Ukraine. Also part of the annual, Dutch James is with us, a part of the annual intelligence report is without US aid, that 60 billion, basically Russia's going to take more land. It's probably going to lead to military victory. And yeah, there's a lot of what to do with this conversations going on around
I want to say that I think we've been suffering, basically a 30-year case of Gulf War syndrome. For people watching the show who don't know, Gulf War syndrome was a catch-all term for unexplainable illnesses of American soldiers who participated in the Gulf War with Saddam. There were a lot of speculations, exposure to hazardous substances. So I want to say that in general, culturally, we suffered from Gulf War syndrome because it started this whole mythology that, all of the fear in the Cold War was unfounded. Russian tanks versus American tanks. The American tanks would easily win, like they did with Saddam, because he had mostly Soviet equipment. And a lot of it was exaggerated to begin with because Saddam did have export model T-72s. However, most of those were destroyed already by the Iranians. What he had left and what he sent into Kuwait was mostly those T-55. And you're talking a 40-year gap between what the U.S. was using and what Saddam had. So that whole mythology. And also on top of that, too, in the 1980s, we were actually upgrading our arsenal, bringing out the Abrams and the Bradley, but we really haven't done much with it since then because we're fighting guys in sandals. And if we just say, well, the Russians have been upgrading their arsenal and improving, and we really haven't for the most part. So now you have this rematch with actual T-72s and Abrams, and the T-72s coming out on top like that. It's not good for optics, as you said.
This is what I hear some friends of mine in Europe say, well, the US sent their old junk, not the new cutting edge stuff. And I keep telling them, the Patriot air defense system is the staple. It is the air defense system that is currently supposedly the best in the West. The M1 Abrams is the main battle tank, the same as the Leo in Germany, which had one predecessor. I recently read about this, and I don't know it out of hand, but a West German US cooperation that kind of failed to produce a tank because they couldn't agree on material price disagreements. So they went their different ways and produced the same sort of tank in different places, and they stopped. 50 years ago, they stopped while the Russians didn't, and this is really coming back to bite them. I mean, the F-16s that now apparently they're going to send 6. Because it's complex to send them. That's something I also read from CNN. They're going to send 6. Same period. It's a 1970s jet. They're not sending the 5th generation amazing F-13, which kind of every 2 weeks is a story about it crashing or breaking. Very expensive. Diva. Even the F-16s they call diva jets, but they say that because of the landing strips. But still, what the Russians said. I wish I had the clip. I'll pass it over to you and see if you can find it.
The problem with the, of course, I see this all the time when I post stuff online, and I have the trolls in the comments saying, well, if the F-35 went, well, the problem is the F-16 is a battle tested and has a deserved good reputation. The F-16, the F-35 does not. It still has zero kills. Even that Chinese balloon that was shot down by an F-22, not even the F-35.
The Virgin F-22 at the time.
Yes.
That was the first.
So even the F-22 with its own extremely troubled production history has one up on the F-35. And as far as the excuse that, the good Abrams haven't been sent to Ukraine, well, the problem is that even the newest A2 Abrams, that the U.S. Army uses for itself, and those vaunted depleted uranium modules, and those are in the front armor. So the kills that we have seen, the hits, the trussel, the hits to the turrets, would have doomed the A2 just as much as the A1. It makes no difference what model.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring that in.
No problem.
You probably know this video. Carlo might have something to say before that.
I just wanted to add that Max Blumenthal just won the Pierre Spray Award.
Congrats to Max.
And Pierre Spray and Aaron Monte won it the year before. And Pierre Spray, he backs up what Ian is saying. Let me be clear. He was an engineer that worked on the F-15, the F-16, the F-35, and I went to his house for a recording session of his Maple Shade recording studio. We had a steak dinner together and all that stuff. But that's not the point. Is that he was very down on the F-15, very bullish about the F-16, but his real criticism came with the F-35, and he raised a huge stink. He passed away a few months ago. Maybe a year ago. He made a real stink about the F-35 and its ineffectiveness. I don't know nothing about aeronautics and all of that, but what he said, and he was obviously an authority because his responsibility was for the shape and the skin of the plane to give it its stealth quality that it would avoid radar. And he says the way it went was just a piece of multi-million-dollar junk.
Yeah. So within the production, there's problems, and I think we might transition soon to another story which concerns Boeing at some point. But I think this video is worth sharing, even without English subtitles, which I can show. Just take a listen to an average Russian soldier giving a short, 1:35 description of the fabled NATO weapons, which I think is topical here.
Вот пример нас на войне, нахуй, ебаный рот. Самые крутые в мире, блядь, леопарды, блядь. Это пиздец, это супер техника, супер пиздец вообще, нахуй, ебаный рот, нахуй, блядь. Приехали, нахуй, и умылись тут, нахуй, все, блядь, кровью, нахуй, эти леопарды. Ни автомата заряжания, ни хуя ничего нет. Все, блядь, нахуй, тяжеленные, буксуют, нихуя толку от них нет. Вон их похуярили сколько, напротив нас, вот здесь, нахуй, ебать. Кладбище, нахуй, устроили, ебаный рот. Точно так же с их самыми крутыми Абрамсами будет. Тоже это все распиаренная хуйня. И так во всем. Любой наш автомобиль возьми военный, нахуй, блядь, и ихний, нахуй. У нас, блядь, жрет, что хочешь, нахуй, блядь. На коленке можно сделать, отремонтировать. У нас, блядь, техника, блядь, вот эта вся, она предназначена для войны. А у них она предназначена для тухлых, блядь, понтов, нахуй, блядь. Вот попонтоваться, смотри, как он крутой, у него там то, все, хуе-мое, нахуй, ебать. Вот покупайте наши, они же, сука, торгаши, нахуй. Вот они их парят по всему миру. Их не Патриот, нахуй, в жопе, нахуй. Сука, нахуй, наш, блядь, самолет, нахуй, за раз, блядь. Он, блядь, выпускает 35 всех своих ракет, нахуй, по ложным целям, нахуй. И наш самолет его спокойненько въебывает.
Here's the part that needs no
супер патриот, нахуй, которым всем впарили. Саудовской Аравии, Корее, блядь, Японии, Европе, блядь. Всем-всем. А у меня, оказывается, вот так, опа, имеем, нахуй. И хуй, нахуй, эти американцы, нахуй. Да обосрались, нахуй. И еще обосрутся, нахуй, блядь. У меня все, нахуй.
Спасибо. I thought, even though I think it's more than a year old, that clip is just.
And also, Scott Ritter had an interesting remark. He said, once again, going back to the Iran-Iraq War, he said he spoke with a weapons expert in Iran, and he said that the T-72 was much more maneuverable and much lighter than the Abrams tank, and that they were throwing around it. Can this be possible? The Abrams tank weighs 70 tons. That can't be possible, right? That's too heavy. It does. If that's actual weight, oh my God! And it would get bogged down in the sand and that sort of thing. And so that for instance, in Ukraine, the Abrams tank and the Leopard 2 are too big to cross a number of these rural bridges that they're encountering, whereas the old T-72 Soviet tanks can cross these bridges because they're lighter and they're smaller. The one thing that the Iranians said was the T-72 was very uncomfortable, whereas the Abrams tank was more like a luxury car vehicle to sit in.
Nice leather seats, a coffee
Yeah.
holder.
The bells and whistles.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a Lamborghini of war. Go
big-
ahead, Ian.
The big thing is that, well, one is that not having that autoloader means there has to be a fourth crew member, and so that makes it bigger. And the problem with the bigger tank is that it's mathematics. The more surface area you have, I mean, that's it increases the weight at a larger over proportionally increases the weight, because you have to add more surface area. You have to add more weight. It's like the problem with the Titanic, that they made the ship bigger but didn't make the rudders big enough. It's the same problem with armor. You have to disproportionately make things bigger as you make the object to the surface area itself larger. So that's part of the problem of why they're so heavy. And the additional problem is, we switched away.
Turbine engine.
Turbine
Maybe
engine is
you
part
want
of the reason it needs that. And like the T-80 has a turbine as engine as well, and that's partially why it's viewed favorably for defensive operations, because it is a very well protected tank. The bigger thing is that there was that choice when the Soviets started rolling out those autoloaders, those carousels buried in the tank. The West had that choice as well. Do we go with an autoloader design, or do we go with a crewman to hand load? And we had that much vaunted, external rack with blowout panels, where the majority of the ammunition is. Now that worked in the Cold War, where even airstrikes, where even close air support from the enemy would most 99% of the time be from the front. It wasn't an option back then most of the time to hit from a different angle, from the rear or the sides. But they didn't anticipate the prevalence of drones and the prevalence of just how much more dispersed fighting is. Those big spearheads of armored columns just don't really happen in Ukraine. So it's much more of a 360 environment. And that's in that bustle is a detriment rather than an asset, because you can hit $450 drone to that bustle, and there goes your ammunition supply. And that might not kill the crew if the blowout panels work correctly, but it is a mission kill on the tank with $450 drone.
Or, which is what we're seeing increasingly, is the Fab series, these old basically gravity bombs, but with these special kits. The wings, turns them into a precision glide strike. And apparently they're terrifying to anyone who survives near them. They get like permanent instant shock. The Fab 1500s, there was a big headline about how they're changing the battlefield. And just to return for a second to Spanish Fab's comment, I mean, if you look at Russian operator videos, especially like when they took out the first Leopard, they're emotional people. I mean, there was this photo recently of an international crew going up to the ISS space station. I don't know, a French and American, and the Russian guy in the middle. Both of them are smiling, and the Russian guy is serious, like that. But when a Russian guy smiles, it's real. It's emotional. He's happy to see you. When a Russian guy is happy, you probably go into these strings of swearing heavily, I think. And the drone operator videos with audio are the best in the world. I love them. Small point to make. Okay.
I didn't follow that remark. I mean, is he criticizing the swearing, or?
No, I think he
there's a lot of swearing. I know enough Russian to
empathizing with it, I'd say.
So there's a lot of swearing in that.
Yeah.
I think people get that this isn't clean Russian language.
Okay. What were you going to say, Ben? Sorry.
I was thinking, because you brought up these aircrafts, and basically since the 1970s, the production and a lot of the stuff, especially except for the price, has not increased. Maybe we want to talk about the Boeing story, which there's some interesting things going on. There was this whistleblower guy. I'm going to find his name. It is just a fact. John Barnett, right? Who, like, he was like I don't know how many years old, but he retired in 2017 from Boeing, and he had many complaints. He was in the middle of a court case, recently appeared to criticize their safety standards, which is in production, and also. So anyway, he was found dead in his car. The headline said the U.S., but I think it was. Damn, I forgot. There's also a dance from the 1920s that is the same name as this place, but he was found dead after a string of mishaps. First the bolts were missing, so a frame, like a door flew off of the Boeing, and now there was this incident.
The wheel.
There was a wheel that crashed into a parking lot of cars, and just yesterday I heard about this. The what do you call it? LATAM flight, also a Dreamliner, that just suddenly dropped and people got injured, 50 or 60 injured, and then safely landed somewhere in New Zealand. And there's just seems to be a lot of this going on. And this guy was due to a next court date or a court interview on Saturday, and now he's found dead in his car. And all we can read is it's a self-inflicted wound. Nothing, no context I have seen so far.
Can you imagine if a guy in Russia who was set to appear in court against a Russian aviation manufacturer in a big court case and just turned up dead of a self-inflicted wound, shot twice in the back of the head kind of deal, like that? That's the only story we would hear about 24/7.
We have a case study. The EU named sanctions after Navalny because it was Putin. They know it was Putin from day one. It was Putin killed him. They know it. They don't know who blew up the Nord Stream, but they know who killed. Like in North Siberia somewhere, they know who killed Navalny.
He was Karen Silkwooded. I mean,
he's the one guy with the 2 shots to the head.
Well, that was Gary Webb.
Gary Webb, sorry.
You had Danny Casolaro. Of course, you have Bill Casey, He's in the hospital dead the day before he's scheduled to testify before Congress about Iran-Contra. Boom, he's dead. So, the one of the passengers questioned the pilot, and he said, what went on there? And the pilot said,
technical glitch is what I've read, but tell us.
My instruments went out. They went black for a period of time, and that evidently caused a rapid descent of the plane, which
not scary at all, is it?
The ceiling of the plane injured 50 people. So, and he said, fortunately, they came back on. Otherwise, they would all been dead. They would have crashed. It was a rapid descent, the pilot said, in that short period of time. So Boeing's got some answering to do.
Well, it's
the bottom of the murder.
There have been in the past few years, not in the USA, but I think it was Indonesian Airlines was one. Unfortunately, I can't remember the second one, but there were 2 major disasters that killed everybody on board with Boeing aircraft.
MH17, that's the Indonesian one, isn't it? Forget it. I said something. I'm not clear on this either, but go ahead. So there were 2 major tragedies.
So there have been a couple of, these are all close calls. And I think, I don't want to stereotype here, but the American airlines probably have a better standard of inspections before flights than certain other developing countries where they might just miss one of those things and not ground the aircraft, which causes it to fatally crash like that. So I think it's just my point is that it's just at this point dumb luck that the USA or a European country using Boeing aircraft has not had a major disaster. So everybody's just kind of sleep and complacent about it. It's like, as long as it's one of those, they don't really care when it's one of those countries that has a big tragedy, but it's only a matter of time if it's not addressed before it happens to us as well.
Yeah, in both of those instances, everyone was killed.
Yes.
Yeah. There's this, I guess, conspiracy theorist. I don't know if that gets us stricken or not. Captain Dan Handley on Twitter. He's got a 9/11 thing going, but he also mentioned that this was basically Boeing was situated again in the 1970s. The 747. We called it jumbo jet. I remember in the 90s when I first saw one. Like how slow it's amazing. Look, we have before that. We just have Tupolev. We were in that block. and we saw our first jumbo jet. Look how amazing, Western shit. And he said it transitioned from the north. I forget which state, but I remember the state where this guy was found, which is the same as the Charleston, same as the dance in the 1920s, Charleston. But it transferred to the south, where union laws are very lax. So they were experienced engineers in the union in the north, and they went to the south where there were much weaker protections. And interestingly, like the next day or the day before, I'm not sure, but I watched a short video, but Al Jazeera, so a Qatari investigation, what do you call it, undercover investigation of this manufacturing process. And a whole lot of the people said, like, I'm going to whip this out of my ass, but maybe 13 out of 15 said I wouldn't fly one of these, just based on what I've seen down here. And apparently there was a lot of substance abuse going on the assembly line as well. Worth checking up. But yeah, bad weather for Boeing. At the same time as the C-19, the Comac, the indigenous Chinese jets, is doing its maiden voyage. Sukhoi Superjet 100, the Russian version, has already had its maiden flight. You know, I don't think the duopoly, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, it's the same with Boeing and Airbus, the French version. I think it's also under challenge, but it's a very odd string.
It's an unfortunate. Well, it's the way U.S. labor is organized. So there are industries, and it almost doesn't matter which industry it is, whether it's coal or aviation, regardless. You have this system where some shops are unionized and some are not. And it's differentiated by states usually. So what happens is, since there's a finite number of slots in a unionized workplace, what happens is that's the new people, those entry-level people who want to cut their teeth and build up a resume so they can eventually get into a union shop, will go to those non-union shops. So one, you have people who are much less experienced, and of course, more problems, because of course, if you eventually get to that point in your career, you realize you're just not going to progress, that you'll stop caring, do drugs or whatever. We're
talking, precision aviation. It's life and death stuff.
It's the same if you look at the major, like in the coal industry in the USA. If you look at like all of the major, like every single one of the major catastrophes and loss of life in the coal industry in the USA was in non-union shops. I'm sure that's true in aviation as well. If you look at these mishaps and where those planes originated from, it's probably the same story. Those non-union work for hire states. I'm not sure if South Carolina, where Charlton is it a Carl? Do you know if it's a right to work state? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
It probably is. Most red states are.
Yeah, I will say that my daughter works for the UAW, the United Auto Workers, and we were just talking one night, and I brought up how brutal that work is on an assembly line. And she said yes, and she just backed up everything Ian's talking about, where you guys are talking about drug abuse, people that are not stable working on the line and that sort of thing. She had about 5 or 6 different categories, and because it's very monotonous and brutal work working on an assembly line or working on any factory floor. So I imagine inspecting planes has the same sort of repetitive aspect to it that's mind numbing. I've done a little bit of that, and it's mind numbing. It's not fun.
Oh, I only had experience in a local glove factory. Box to box, that sort of very monotonic, very soul killing.
I worked the night crew in a printing plant, and that was dreadful. I just the rump shift, the late shift, 12 to 8. So it was awful.
It's just interesting, hooking back to the military side of things, that they're also planning these smart little drones, fighter drones. So not just bombing and anything, fighter drones, which is Boeing is involved, as well as Raytheon, Lockheed, I think 3 or 4 of the big MIC companies against Russia and China. And it looks to me obvious that it's for pricing purposes, market forces. That's how the US goes, because they're about the 10th of the price of the F-35 and way less than that when you compare it like the B-2 stealth bomber. And yeah, I'm wondering how are those going to perform coming from Boeing, but it might be a different wing of production. But it's interesting that
we're going to see those fighter drones. I mean, I remember when I was a kid and go to the aviation museums, they're talking about the fighter drones of the future. We're not even going to have pilots anymore. Still hasn't happened yet.
China has them. These are
the fighter drones, actually for air.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they accompany actual piloted aircraft, but they have them. They have a wide range of them.
Well, I've read that Boeing teamed up with McDonnell Douglas, and they are strictly a military manufacturer. And when that occurred, the quality of Boeing's civil aviation fleet, the airliners, went way down.
Oh,
because
I see.
of pressure from McDonnell Douglas to cut corners. So I just wanted to toss that in, throw Boeing a bone here because its name is up front, but McDonnell Douglas is right behind the curtain. So calling the shots in a lot of ways.
What's interesting in the drone department is the introduction of completely autonomous drones, which apparently have seen some exposure in Ukraine. The advantage of an autonomous drone, if you can get it to work correctly and do basic target acquisition without a human operator, the big advantage that brings to the table is that it can't be jammed because it's not.
Yeah, it's AI. Well, they call it AI, not what Carlo means by AI, but AI enhanced.
I think they call it AI because Chat GPT is the big thing now, and so corporations tend to use those catchy phrases, even though it's not AI in the normal sense of the words, but it's autonomous.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
That's some because Ukraine is, of course, the dumping ground for every arms corporation that wants to test their toys, and allegedly Russia's also developing some, so that might be an interesting development.
We can clear the AI thing up. There's two different AIs: weak AI and strong AI. And weak AI is what Ian's talking about. It's a system that's used for a specific purpose. Strong AI is an attempt to mimic human nature, for lack of a better phrase.
Which we will discuss once. I think is impossible, but Carlo can make a very good case for how it's possible and threatening us, on another occasion.
Yeah.
I was wondering, Regis is still not with us. I'm ready to add him to the conversation at any point if he should join us. But at the height of this, military losses, trying to do symbolic victories by incursions and losing more gear, losing the top gear that they got from the West. The Pope had the audacity to call for, I think it was, and I don't know if this is an Italian thing, the white flag of strength. I don't know if that's that's different meaning in Italy. And all of the usual suspects went into blind rage, and that comes from Anne Applebaum's Paul Toy, Mr. Sikorsky, Mr. Rinkevich, one of the three Baltic midgets went mad, as well as Zelensky, as well as Kuleba, about no, we cannot have peace with these people. They even rejected Mr. Erdogan's proposal to have a peace summit with Russia present, just Russia present, saying no, we cannot talk to these people. And that's why my secondary title would have had Vatnikan in it, because it's got trending again, because apparently now the Pope is horrible Putinista, Vatnik, Muscovite swine, because he dared to do this. And even the Vatican's diplomatic corps itself is in a defensive mode against the accusations, similar to Fico and Orban in Hungary. But it just turned into a shit show, like over the weekend. This one small statement from His Holiness the Pontiff. And I really enjoyed the madness behind it. I don't know if you want to have some thoughts on that, or I should bring in something I read over the weekend, which to me was the most memorable, that kind of explains some of the Western leaders, I suppose, psychology at this point. Let's have a very quick read. I haven't heard of this man before. It's not Bremer from the military industrial complex, but an academic, Michael Brenner, and the West Reckoning. There was another one, by the way, by David Sachs, which said how Russia survived the sanction, and the opposite of what we expected happened. But this goes into more the leadership, and I'm just going to quickly read this first part of it. Like, Western leaders are experiencing two stunning events: defeat in Ukraine, genocide in Palestine. The first is humiliating, the other is shameful, yet they feel no humiliation or shame. Their actions show vividly that those sentiments are alien to them, unable to penetrate the entrenched barriers of dogma, arrogance, and deep-seated insecurities. The last are personal as well as political, and therein lies a puzzle. There's more of this. It's an excellent article, which should have been broadcast everywhere. But I want to say there was a follow-up article by Thomas Fazi, a fantastic either strong left-leaning or communist author from Italy. He's fantastic. Give him a follow. He's both on Substack and on Twitter, who went into the psychology of Western leaders who had all of this, we are the exceptional people, not just the US, but also Europeans, and we can't lose, we can't be responsible for bad things. And he said that's clinical psychopathy. And he renamed the oligarchic system, because it's in service to oligarchy, the pathogarchy. So Thomas Fazi, congratulations, if ever you watch this, that you coined that really cool phrase. That's why they're retreating into all sorts of fantasy, exchanging some Taurus missiles with some Storm Shadows, and then we send it in, and then Russia won't know it's from Germany, or sending troops, not sending troops, Mr. Macron's weird fantasies of getting the Baltic midgets aboard for some sort of incursion and saving Project Ukraine. What's most interesting to me in at least the last couple of months, this year, let's say, is this Western absolute hysterics, like headless chicken is what I say they are at the moment, when the US seems basically washing their hands and saying, this isn't our project, thanks very much. There's been a lot of those articles as well. I mean, one senator, I can't recall his name, he said, you can either have the US in NATO or you can have Ukraine. You just can't have both. I mean, they're restructuring the aid to Ukraine to become a loan. That's the best sign of we're out. So everybody is running to Washington. Meloni was there recently. I think Mr. Duda, the president of Poland, is there. Come on, please don't give more aid to Ukraine, because they're in an absolute panic. I thought maybe
I can talk about the psychology a little bit.
Yes, please.
If you look up the definition in DSMD, whatever it is called, the official psychiatric guidebook, I would say.
What's psychopathy say?
It has about 8 categories, and these people fit them all. Now, if you in that mindset, even when people die on their behalf, that boosts their ego. I mean, the more people that they can control in these different ways, it boosts their ego. I remember it made me, what you're saying made me think of Herman Kahn, who he wrote a book called On Thermonuclear War, and he went around the country trying to convince Americans at all these gatherings he would have at different different local gathering places, like the Moose Lodge or the Lions Club or something, and he would try to convince people that it was worth nuking the Russians back in the 50s or in the early 60s, because
the Churchill plan, right?
10% of the people or 30% of Americans would survive, and he was trying to convince people of this, and he wasn't very effective, thank God, but that was his job, and he was so egotistical about it, and when he talked to the average citizen, he talked down to them. So they were no more than a calculation for him. I think he calculated something like, well, Rosalie knows this better than I do, but like for every death if you using a thermonuclear weapon, it only costs like 1.4 cents to kill the person. That kind of analysis. I'm probably not accurate with the figure, But these people, that's the psychopathic. I started using that for the Vietnam War and the people around the Vietnam War. And at that time, people would go, "Oh, you're exaggerating," But I've become convinced over the years that uh, psychopaths they are. That they are psychopaths. That's a very accurate framework. So you can't deal with psychopaths. Uh, you can't. I mean,
Yeah,
even
I mean,
I
thinking
don't.
of a limited nuclear war like you described, that seems so out there,
It's just insane.
psychopathic
It
to
was
me.
just crazy.
Well, and it's interesting based on, just go bounce off of what Carlos said. Um, for a very long time, nuclear weapons were considered a tactical weapon. MacArthur wanted to use them in Korea. The Air Force wanted to use them in Vietnam. And considering they plastered 3 different countries with
Yeah, Curtis
mines,
LeMay.
Trump wants to use them in the Middle East.
Yes.
Like, can't we just nuke him? I think that was part of one of these.
But the difference between Trump and Air Force guys is that Trump is a child, and these Air Force guys should know better, unfortunately. So, but and speaking of Trump, I'll bring up, I'll contrast that with my own experience. I remember this was late 2015, before the election, and by then it was the choice between Hillary Clinton and Trump. And I remember the exact moment. I feel like I'm actually kind of a minority, unfortunately, because I remember the exact moment I decided, we cannot under any circumstances have Hillary Clinton as president. And that's when she said, we need a no-fly zone over Syria. It's like, this is a direct war. You can't. And it was amazing because at the same time, there was a survey, and you can look up this survey. There was a survey of Americans that asked 2 questions. So basically it asked them, would you support a no-fly zone over Syria? And the majority said yes. But then the second question was they would explain what a no-fly zone is. And the majority voted no, which is amazing because it's like over Serbia. You can't just say, oh, please, pretty please don't fly planes over this area. It's you shoot down aircraft, which is an act of war. So Hillary Clinton was saying their direct war with Russia is like, okay, regardless of what Trump is like, Hillary Clinton is going to take us into World War III because she's an idiot. But the reason I call myself a minority is because the vast majority of people who voted for Trump did not vote for that reason. I mean, I'm sure you could ask 1,000 people why they voted for Trump, and I might be the only person out of those 1,000 who said it because I don't want to die in a nuclear war. I think that's not a crazy thing to say, but so my problem with Republicans right now is that, yes, on this issue, broken clock is right twice a day. They're right not supporting Ukraine, but for the wrong reasons. You ask Republicans, why do you not support? Oh, because we're sending them money. Oh, the poor money, our money. They'll but it's like, that's, you could be upset about 500,000 people who've died so far. You could be upset by the fact that this might trigger a nuclear war. You could be upset about, it does.
Oh, damn.
Well,
I thought it was another freeze, but we might have lost him for a second. I hope he will be back. I will add him back instantly if he appears. God.
Just to expand on what he was saying, it's like I talked about last time. A reporter, obviously from CNN or someplace like that, when I asked a crowd waiting for a Trump rally, whether whether they supported how they felt about the Ukraine war, and they said, well, we don't want to send any more money to a person. Not one of them, like I said, knew about the Maidan coup or the shelling of the Donbass. And thank goodness he in his back, so he can.
I think that was the deep state, listening and coming after me for saying that. But what I was saying though is that so it's all for the wrong. And combined with that, because when you're just upset about money, it's like being upset. Oh, I forgot to unsubscribe from that streaming service I don't use and got charged an extra $15 this month. That's so it's like your net. So it's like this war in Ukraine is on the same level of concern as your Netflix bill.
Yeah, it's a faraway thing.
Yes, so Republicans are right to be annoyed about Ukraine. The problem is that they're only annoyed. You can talk to Republicans, and I'm sure, Carlo, this matches your experience. You can talk to Republicans all day, and there's just this apathy. They're not particularly excited or upset about the problem. It's just a bartering chip. Ukraine is just a bartering chip to them, and that's exactly what it's like for Republicans in Congress. It's not they're opposed. Yeah, I know what CNN and liberal news outlets love to say, oh, the MAGA Republicans are blah, 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 because they're working for Putin. But the reality is they just see it as a bartering chip. That's all it is to them.
Yeah, it's used it's just a political tool,
Mm-hmm.
and the general population knows nothing about Ukraine. All they know is what Marjorie Taylor Greene has told them, and it's just too expensive.
Even though, to his credit, Robert Kennedy Jr. is accurate on Ukraine. He's completely inaccurate on Israel and Gaza,
Mm-hmm.
but at least he tries to tell that story. Not that he's got any chance, guys. I mean, Biden's out because of basically televised genocide. It is going to be Trump at this point. So, I mean, go, Carlo.
If they let him.
Yeah.
If they let him.
Oh
win.
yeah, of course. I spoke
Yeah,
to him.
right. I don't know. He's pretty high profile. That could spur a lot of violence, actually, if Trump was well, if he was, can I say it?
Undone.
If he was assassinated, and I don't think they're going to get him on any of these lesser, juridical.
I think Trump as a martyr is worse than Trump himself, because Trump as a martyr can be whatever you want him to be, but when you have real
True.
Trump, you have an idiot. So
Yeah,
you can imagine
true.
you can imagine Trump however you want when he's a martyr.
And just to follow up a little on that, so Elon Musk visits Trump, and Elon Musk has a lot of money, and Trump needs a lot of money. And I'm very curious. I think personally, that he went there to work out a deal where he lends Trump the money to pay his fines, and when Trump is elected, there's a quid pro quo. I don't know if anybody else feels that way.
I have no way of knowing to know. I mean, it's true. Elon Musk has a lot more money than Trump, but he has a lot more money than basically anyone. I'm not sure if it's a question of how liquid Trump is and how liquid Musk is, because as we know, most rich people's assets aren't liquid. So when you want to pull $80 million out of your butt, you have to take an asset and liquefy it, which sounds terrible, but that's essentially what you have to do. So I don't know how liquid Trump is. That's a good question.
I remember this headline, like Elon Musk looks very Trumpy, but does he support Trump? And it came after, he went to Mar-a-Lago as well as my prime minister, Viktor Orban. And I kind of feel the same as what you described when you said you voted. I don't like this fucker. I do not like Viktor Orban in many, many things, especially domestic. He got us into NATO 25 years ago today. So 1/3 of its 75-year existence, we've been in this bloody, horrific, basically US weapons manufacturing's little marketing scheme. And he got us into it. So I have rough feelings. But what he was to 2022, right after the SMO began, was we're not going to take part in this. We're peace loving, and that's it. Sorry, that was my vote. And I thought maybe as a last story to discuss is, he went to Mar-a-Lago, and I remember Carlo mentioning this on Friday, but I haven't seen a lot of news about it at that time. And over the weekend, I've collected it. It's like amazing. Like Trump 2.0, the second term, he's going to learn from Orban how to dismantle democracy, how to get rid of the opposition groups. They refer to his Sovereignty Protection Bureau, in which US, for example, US money cannot buy politicians or advertising in Hungary, which is a great thing. But also Fico is now, who is the prime minister of Slovakia. He is now looking at the homework from Orban, isolate them. And one of the best things to happen for the worst reasons, like Ian said, is right now there's been a motion passed that some European MEPs, the members of European Parliament, are suing Ursula's commission, not because of anything else, but the rule of law is not compatible with sending 10 billion euros to Hungary. That's why she's going to get into legal trouble, because she released funds to Hungary. It's all out. The two bad guys, Fico and Orban, and Trump. It looks like attached by the umbilical, got a whole lot of absolute hysterical headlines: end of democracy, authoritarianism, all that you can imagine. Go ahead, Carlo. I see you're bursting.
You can't dismantle what doesn't exist.
That's a fair point too.
And I had another point to make about that, but right. Well, I'll make it at the end. Let's go back into the history here. When Joe Kennedy bought Richard Daley and the Chicago Machine, and Illinois went for his son Jack, that was a huge scandal, and I don't know why I'm actually bringing it up, but that was the way that elections. Trump in a sense and his people were right. The election was rigged, but they never could figure out how, and the way it was rigged. Well, we'll never know the details. I don't know why I brought that up, but I wanted to ask Ben a question. Do you think that this $10 billion that's coming Orban's way is this quid pro quo for backing Sweden?
I don't think that's the case. I think it's for backing the 50 billion for 4 years
to Ukraine.
Yeah, I think that was part of that deal. For Sweden, what we got was a promise of a bunch of Gripens, Swedish aircraft that never actually had an air win, but they apparently, in practice, what do you call them? These drills, they marked, as in, if in real combat they shot down like 5 F-16s. That's their performance. That's what we're getting in exchange for letting Sweden in, after Finland.
Here's the thing about NATO, which I've been thinking about, especially after Finland and now Sweden are in it. The question is NATO a serious military bloc? Is it a serious alliance, or is it the social club? Because, I have to put myself in the shoes of these world leaders, right? So if you're thinking, okay, this is a country that I could potentially get sucked into a war over something stupid they did, right? You're going to be really careful who you let into that club. And you're going to be really careful about who is neighboring that, so it's like, okay, Turkey getting into it. Okay, it's cool. I mean, Turkey's a cool country. It's geographically a cool country. And there's not really any serious problems Turkey, as far as a war goes, that Turkey could get themselves into that would pull NATO down with this.
The Armenians might soon disagree, but I get your point.
Armenia, I get your point. Armenia, yeah. But when they do take in, particularly Finland, you have to wonder, okay, if Orban and Erdogan voted yes on that without breaking a sweat, that has to make, that vaunted Article 5, which is not as binding as people claim it is. It's just, you can send a box of Band-Aids or thoughts and prayers or nothing at all and still meets the requirements. And also it's an international treaty. If someone just says, you can't, because international treaties do not overrule the rule of law in your own country. It's just like if someone just says, you know what, I'm not going to do anything. What is anyone going to do about it? Nothing. So you have this voluntary alliance of countries with a bunch of stupid members in it. If there's an actual war, the question is, will the other members respond, or are they going to do game theory where, you can win by not playing? And Macron throwing his weight around, talking about a coalition of the willing, maybe getting the Baltic Tigers or somebody to send troops to Ukraine, and they get into a mess. They get hit with a Caliber missile. Well, Tigers. And, and they cry and said our troops were attacked. They were on an innocent peacekeeping mission and invoke Article 5. I think that'd be a really interesting test of NATO.
Yeah, it is. But they wouldn't be at home. France wouldn't get attacked,
Well, yes, but I think when it comes to the illusion, even if they're not in France, even if they're not in Estonia or Latvia, that would be enough to break the spell. Because in practice, if someone has your back, if the USA says, I have your back, it doesn't matter where your troops get killed. The USA will come and support you. But if they don't have your back, because the thing is, like, let's say there's a border dispute or there's actual there's an actual shooting something serious happens between, let's say, just hypothetically, Estonia and Russia, or Finland and Russia. There's blood spilled, there's loss of life, and they cry and invoke Article 5. You could say, well, you know what? I think that was Estonia's fault. I think Estonia deserved it, so we're not going to respond, because you can do. It's just, and I think that would. So I think even if they weren't in Estonia or in France and they got killed, that would also break the spell. It'd be very clear. It's just a social club. No one's seriously talking about,
And
fighting to the last man for these crappy
social
countries.
club and weapons marketing club.
Mhm.
This is the same Macron that either the third or the fourth time has now delayed his trip to Kiev. So he's afraid to go there, but the French will save every Ukrainian, of course, the gendarme means. And when you talk about the Latvians, I brought it up, well, not the three Baltic townships masquerading as countries. I wanted you to see this. This was 3 days ago, and all the comments are extremely based. They are commemorating the goddamn bombing by the Red Army of Tallinn, Estonia, 80 years ago to the day, 3 days ago. I wonder who occupied Tallinn at the time. I wonder if they remember, because all they talk about is Russia can't change. Look at what they're doing. They're going to do it again. It was occupied by the goddamn Nazis, and it gets pointed out, after the stream, by basically every comment. Like, okay,
why are Russians bombing us? Right.
Thank you for showing your true colors. And you get into bed with these mad people who, since 1990, have been absolutely anti-commie, but then also anti-Russian in their education, in their tearing down of monuments, in their erasing of their history. And you get these trigger-happy little yimps in there. Yeah, you can have some unexpected situations. So I just wanted to throw little Estonia and their tantrums in there, because they're the most gung-ho out of all of these, as well as Mr. Sikorsky, who seem to believe that they can win. And I don't know where to put their brains at this moment. Do you know?
Yeah.
All right, guys. What do you think? Maybe we kind of wrap it up. I can't wait to give back this responsibility to Billy Bob, who will be with us on the 15th Friday.
We can do can I do a couple of things real fast?
Yeah.
Of course, Carlo. Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. I've got Chinese television on, and they just announced that the Sudanese armed forces have taken back the main TV station, and driven out the U.S.-backed rebel forces.
Sudan or South Sudan?
Sudan, not South Sudan.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but I mean the whole thing flared up when Russia announced it wanted to build a port military base on the east of Sudan, on the eastern shore of Sudan. That we can talk a little bit about Haiti too. I mean,
you should tell us a bit about Haiti, but what with regard to Sudan, I also read that Zimbabwe just kicked out all the U.S. aid people.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Good riddance. Don't look back.
That was on your cheat sheet. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, I read some Dan Cohen about Haiti, and I know basic stuff, a little bit about Barbecue Cherizier, but what the Western headline tells me is these are horrific gangs and gang leaders. They're cannibals. It's terrible, and that's why the Prime Minister just, I think, renounced his premiership or something like that. But if you got a bit more on that, then maybe we...
Let us. The president or prime minister of Haiti has resigned, Henri. He's not going to go back. He's out of the country. And I can't say that I blame him, but Haiti's a country that has been exploited since it won its freedom. Actually, before that, it was exploited by the French.
That's why they speak the language. Yeah.
Yeah, and the previous president was assassinated. So Moises. So it's the thing that interested me was I found this article by the Black Alliance for Peace, and they talk about something called the core group, which I actually have to say I was unfamiliar with, and what intrigued me about it was that it's a UN mandated group of 9 individual countries or groupings, institutions, and it's uh, they control Haiti. Haiti's not controlled by its elected officials. It's controlled by this group. At least that's what.
Like top to bottom, politics, law enforcement, military.
Yeah,
Like,
the basically everything, and the group members are Brazil, Canada, France, Germany, Spain, the European Union, the United States, and the Organization of American States. Now, I mean, Brazil's surprising on here. They're very critical of Brazil uh, because of some vested interest and very critical of Lula, some vested interest in Brazil that beyond the fact that they've supplied police forces before, like Ruto from Kenya is willing to provide now 1,000 policemen. That I can't imagine the revenues coming from that would influence Lula that much that he would be that anxious to stay in Haiti. But apparently he's under criticism. You can understand the other countries and especially the OAS, the Organization of American States, because it's run. The guy's name.
that's a U.S. umbrella, absolutely.
Yeah, he's a right wing ninny fanatic, and it's just intriguing to me that this core group exists at all, and I thought it was worthwhile mentioning it. The Black Alliance for Peace put out this article, and they operate here, right here in Washington D.C. And I thought I'd mention that. And the last thing I wanted to mention was my favorite rabbi, and my favorite it's his name is Rabbi
Not Shmooly.
Israel David Weiss or Weiss, however you want to pronounce it, and he's been going around the talk show circuit, and he's talking about how he hates the Zionists. He despises them and thinks they must leave. They must leave Palestine, Israel. They must leave the region because, as he's demonstrated time and time again in these interviews, the Arabs and the Jews lived in peace before the Zionists got there, and that the Arabs actually took Jews in and allowed them to live there in not under a Zionist rubric, but under a religious rubric, and that he doesn't consider the Zionists even Jews. They're not religious. They in any kind of meaningful way, and that goes for rabbis that are calling for the extermination of the Gazans. So he's my hero. He's my hero right now. I admire him a great deal for his courage and his principled stance.
Rabbi
So,
Weiss. I have to look it up. Another
Rabbi,
group.
yeah, Weiss.
Yep, another group called Torah Judaism. I see them organizing pretty big protests in the U.S. Are very anti-Zionist Jews, which we could use a lot more of nowadays because it's so ridiculous. Just going to paraphrase a little bit what Sir Alistair Crook, the amazingly soft-spoken British diplomat, told the Judge Napolitano's show. That, there was this thing, not a lot of headlines, but that Hungarian Zionist or Romanian, depending on which map you look at when he was born, the guy called Benny Gantz. He was like flying under the radar to Washington, and Kamala and Blinken, and they all were like, "We're going to talk with you, and we're going to." And he paraphrased kind of what happened in that meeting, saying, "Look, I'm here to talk to you, but if you want to sort of split us, I would do the same thing." That Netanyahu is doing. Yeah, we have to take Rafah. This has to, and they were very shocked apparently to hear that. But it's not just a one-person Netanyahu mania, but it's pretty much the political leadership of Israel. And now I've read that apparently they and the United Arab Emirates, the last real Arab, I'm not going to say ally, but relations they have in the region, they come up with this stupid idea of a pontoon pier that the US is building to deliver aid by sea. Listen to the South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor, who said, from this moment on, the force that was given to Israel by its sponsors in Europe and in the US, that should be used to just open up Rafah, the gate city between Europe and Gaza, and just send all that aid in. It's right there. And they're dropping this shit from the sky, which is like worth 3 trucks load. And sometimes they kill people because they malfunction. It's just, yeah, I wish this wasn't near the end of the show because this could get me a bit worked up, but it's just ridiculous and horrific what's going out there. So shout out to Torah Judaism and Rabbi Weiss on the subject. I mean, I hope it ends sooner rather than later, but what mostly I feel when I look at these disagreements, Biden's going to make it conditional to send weapons if Netanyahu attacks Rafah. He's going to make it conditional. That's a reprimand. That's a red line. No, it isn't. It never was.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the United States is cheering Israel on. Official Washington behind the scenes.
It's knee deep in this.
Make no bones about it. Yeah. They're cheering them on. They're disgusting people. They really are. I mean, I have some firsthand anecdotes, but I probably shouldn't talk about them. But my encounters with some of them.
I just don't know how stupid they think we are when they say, Mr. Biden's going to talk down to him. He's going to have a come to Jesus. I don't know what that come to Jesus talk with Netanyahu, and he's going to draw lead lines. Like, come on, man. Like,
well, where is he going to have it now that all the Christian churches in Palestine have been destroyed? I mean,
yeah.
And it's like you said, if they could just break the blockade. I mean, it's already conditional, and Biden could just threaten to stop all the military aid, and Israel would not have a choice. They would either cooperate or run out of bombs.
It's like a number of commentators have pointed out, Biden could stop the genocide right now. This morning, he could make a phone call, say, "That's it. Netanyahu, nothing else is coming in.
Not a dollar, not a bomb.
For you. Goodbye. Nice knowing you."
Well, Democrats love to bring out, Republicans, the party of Reagan, have fallen short of Reagan. They love to say that. Well,
it's so bipartisan, isn't it? If anything, this is bipartisan. Go.
Well, it's insane. Biden has surpassed Reagan because even Reagan made that phone call to Israel, told him to stop when he was president. So when Biden's gone farther than Reagan, that's quite the achievement.
Yeah. And both of them needed somebody basically to tell them what to do. I mean, Reagan didn't make any of his own decisions. He didn't know. They cringed when he went off script. Same thing with Biden. And
the word cringe didn't yet exist.
Dementia. When I'll tell one funny story. When I was we were doing our television show, I was at work, and I was working in a bookstore, and I got a phone call from a guy who said he had information that Ronald Reagan, I think in the 1950s, was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. And this is where it went off. I'm making frantic notes while this phone call's coming in. He goes, and they determined that Reagan's brain was the size of a pea. And that's sort of like, I said, well, I got a nut on the line. I'm going to ease up on the notes. But he went on for about 45 minutes on the phone telling me his experiences with Reagan when he was at the mental hospital and all this stuff. And I said, thanks a whole lot. And then I entertained the notion of having him on the program. But I said, probably not. It's probably not a good idea. But Reagan was mentally impaired, and even before that, he was not interested in presidential, being engaged in the presidency, a lot like some other recent presidents we've had.
I like to think of him sort of like Zelensky because he was the first actor president, right? He went straight from shooting westerns to the presidency, right?
Yeah,
like America's true face, a studio president.
He once made a movie with the chimpanzee, and the chimpanzee was
Good
the
point,
star.
Christy.
I think the chimpanzee was up for an Oscar, and Ronnie wasn't, or something.
Yeah, that was before the governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, was made governor of California, right? So he was the second.
Yeah.
He could he could lift the weights, so he's going to do taxes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, after he left office, Schwarzenegger admitted he actually did it as a joke, and it's not even credit. He said it on a talk show that he's going to run for governor, and he kind of said it as a joke, but then he, there was a media craze, so he ended up feeling compelled to actually run for governor, and he won because Davis was so unpopular in that recall election, and so that's how he got the governor.
All right. Well, some funny stories to end with. Unfortunately, as you can probably see, Slug didn't join me on this one. He's right there on the couch, but we should have a nice doggy ending, unless we have some final thoughts, maybe at 1 hour 20. We should sort of wind it down.
It's good enough to end on, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Spaz always gets impatient near the end with us.
All right. But Spaz is a very good boy or girl, not sure.
He's a boy. Yep.
Good boys, Spaz.
All right.
See you guys.
Thank you for all who have been with us, including the regulars. Hello, Dust. Hello, Spanish Fabs, Christy. And we'll see you Friday with the leadership of the returning leadership of the doggy is the star. There you go. The returning leadership of William Robert or Billy Bob. And yeah, hopefully we'll get back onto normal programming after his, what do we call it? Yeah, his assignment. Yeah.
Right, on assignment.
Yeah. Catch you all next time on Friday. And thanks for being with us.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.